Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Elam Road podcast. Where on today's show, we're going to be previewing the season opener against Nottingham Forest on Sunday. I'm delighted to say that the Athletic's Nick Miller joins me for today. Nick, welcome back. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. How are you?
Yes, very good. Looking forward to the start of the new season. Just remember, before we get going, drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of Forest on Sunday. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Elam Road on Twitter, at Elam Road Pod on Instagram. Nick, I think there's only one place to start, really, given the news over the last couple of days. Europa League football for Forest this season. Your thoughts on the whole situation?
Yeah, it's been a weird summer. Obviously there's been this kind of back and forth about whether Forest were going to be in the Europa League or the Conference League. I was kind of gutted to miss out on the Champions League because you kind of think, well, this would be a one chance you're never going to get. You're not unlikely to get that such a good chance again. But in terms of the Europa and the Conference League, I genuinely wasn't that fussed from a sort of fan perspective. Europa League, you get kind of bigger games and maybe more glamorous trips or whatever. Conference League, there would have been a reasonable chance of Forest winning it. So from that perspective, I wasn't particularly bothered about which competition Forest were in. It was a whole kind of fairly, I don't know what the word is, slightly unedifying spectacle. A lot of the stuff that's gone on over the summer, which, and that said, I don't think many Forest fans are feeling particularly kind of, oh, we're in this competition by default, we should feel ashamed of that kind of thing. Because plenty of teams have got into competitions that they haven't necessarily technically qualified for and done very well out of them. So yeah, it's been weird, and we've got this kind of, after Brentford, Forest next game happens to be against Crystal Palace, in between them playing their two qualifying games for the Conference League. So that's going to be pretty interesting. And weirdly, I think that's, rather than the opening game of the season, I think that's where a lot of Forest fans are kind of directing their attention at the moment. But yeah, it's been strange to say the least.
I think, sort of looking at it from an outside perspective, and I've seen like a few social videos of Forest and Palace fans going back and forth, but kind of from a fan's perspective, there's not really much you can do, really. I mean, it's going on above you. You're going to be in the Conference League, you're going to be in the Europa League. Either way, you're going to be happy with it. So there's not really much else to take from it. But I think, kind of to segue into the next chat on Evangelos Marinakis, it'd be great to get your kind of perspective on him, because his involvement in this case, the Morgan Gibbs-White video, the infamous Morgan Gibbs-White video from the summer, from the outside looking in, he seems like a character, to say the least.
To say the least, yeah. I mean, he is. I mean, he's wildly popular among the Forest support. There's a kind of narrative, which is true, and to a point, and not true to another point, and you can kind of look at the reasons why this is necessary. But there's a sort of narrative that nothing really gets done until the big man gets involved, like the Gibbs-White contract, like certain transfers. That they are, the club are always very keen to put out that it was work from Mr. Marinakis himself that secured this transfer. Which may well be true, but you don't really hear that about a lot of other club owners. He is, as I said, incredibly popular because he is seen as, I think Forest, for a long time, they were probably up until getting promoted a few years ago back into the Premier League, Forest were seen as a very nice club, and maybe so for a certain generation who remember Brian Clough and so on, everyone's kind of second team because they remember Forest playing very nice football. And then Forest were away from the Premier League for 23 years, so people just sort of forgot about them to a point and would just kind of, Forest, they're nice, isn't it? It'd be good if Forest were back in the Premier League. And that, after a while, that became pretty kind of irritating and patronising. So when you have someone like Marinakis, who is forceful, shall we say, in a lot of things, that creates a kind of image where obviously more people don't like Forest anymore, and I think a lot of fans quite like that. I think they quite like that Forest are kind of seen as a little bit, I don't know what the word is, nastier, I suppose, or a little bit less cuddly.
Yeah.
I certainly have a lot of kind of reservations about Marinakis. The scene at the end of a game. I can't remember, it was the Leicester game, I think, at the end of last season, where he was straight out to the pitch and was kind of berating Nuno for whatever reason. No, that's not particularly. It's not the sort of thing you necessarily want to see, but among the wider fan base, certainly he's incredibly popular. Me and a few others have a few more reservations about how he does things, but yeah, it's as you say, a character.
I think it's sort of I can understand why he's madly popular amongst Forest fans, because football's already so tribal, and then if you kind of make it us against the world, and you've got this big guy who's going to front everything. If I was a fan, I would like him as well. Like if I was a Forest fan and we had an owner that people didn't like, I would back him to the hilt. So I can understand why you like him. But yeah, looking at it from the outside, just seems a bit bonkers. But in terms of the kind of influence that you've had over the summer, you mentioned Mr. Marinakis popping up in tweets and the extension of Morgan Gibbs-White's contract. So far, Dan Ndoye, Igor Jesus, Jair Cunha, and Angus Gunn are the main ones coming in. And there's been the end of a few loans as well. Happy with the summer business Forest have done so far?
Yeah, to a point. I mean, we're talking kind of a few days before the first game, and at this point, the squad is weaker than it was at the end of last season, when Forest only had the league and the FA Cup to deal with, and they kind of spluttered to the end of the season. Everyone was looking completely out on their feet, so that is a little bit of a worry. The way Forest do things, obviously, by the time the transfer window shuts, 4, 5, maybe 6 players will have come in, and the squad will probably be looking a lot healthier. Not included on the list there is James McAtee, who looks like he may well be that transfer may well have gone through by the time.
That'd be a very good signing.
Yeah, it may well have gone through by the time that people listen to this. May almost certainly will have gone through by the time of the game at the weekend. And he's the kind of perfect player for Forest in that he can play in a few different positions, can take the sort of creative heat off Morgan Gibbs-White a little bit. He's left-footed, which is kind of a slightly unusual one, because Forest don't really, apart from a couple of centre-backs, they don't really have any left foots in the team at the moment. So that he gives Forest a little bit of balance, and if that kind of goes through, as it looks like it will, that'll be a brilliant signing. So at the moment, the squad doesn't look in amazing shape, because they've lost Anthony Elanga, Ruben Sosa, another sort of reserve winger has gone as well. So looking a bit light in those positions. But I'm not kind of panicking too much, because I know that, that will change by the end of the transfer window.
In terms of your kind of biggest ones, is that Dan Ndoye, or would you say that's Igor Jesus?
Dan Ndoye is the big one, certainly, and he looks really exciting. He looks like a kind of direct Elanga replacement. Really, he probably play a little bit more off the left than Elanga did, who was usually on the right. But he's a fairly direct, very quick winger. He's done brilliantly in Italy and for the Swiss national team as well. So everyone's pretty excited about him. Igor Jesus is an interesting one. He looked pretty good at the Club World Cup when he played for Botafogo. I know people in Brazil aren't kind of entirely sold on him. Certainly as a Premier League player, he's been playing quite a lot in pre-season, but I would doubt he will start the first game of the season. I think he'll be more of a sort of option player, someone who will come in for Chris Wood every now and then, or will play alongside Chris Wood, because they haven't really been able to do that a huge amount previously, to play two up front. I'm actually kind of a little bit more interested in Jair Cunha, who's the his centre back. He's 6'5" tall, I think, but really kind of elegant and good on the ball. There was one moment I had to watch. I'll make it sound like it's a real chore having to watch a football game for my profession. But I watched a Botafogo game at the Club World Cup, and he did this. There was one kind of passage of play where a ball kind of came over his shoulder and he really sort of delicately and elegantly brought the ball down and then kind of turned an attacker in one smooth movement. And I'm, while being aware that I shouldn't take one kind of movement in an isolated game as a kind of representation of his entire game, that made me quite excited. He's only young. I think he's 21, maybe 20, but he looks really promising as well.
You're going to have two kind of Brazilian flair centre backs then, in Murillo and Cunha as well.
Yeah, it's great.
Going to be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be Murillo and Milinkovic will be the first choice centre back. They are a perfect combination, and it's still astonishing a year on that no one else paid the 12 million quid or whatever it was that Forest did for Milinkovic. He was just immense last season.
Well, I think we were actually in for Milinkovic at one point. Brentford fans, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I remember us being in for Milinkovic a while ago, but I can't remember. But anyway, Forest pre-season, Nick, 7 played, no wins, 1 goal scored. In light of that, pre-season means fuck all, correct?
Yes, it does. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it became a running gag by the end. The positive way of looking at it is that Forest didn't really concede many goals either, but it would have been nice to score a few as well. So yeah, the pre-season results don't mean anything, but it is a little bit of a concern. The thing is, talking to you kind of talk to professional footballers, as I occasionally do. It is amazing how much there is a switch in their heads that they will kind of, once a game means something, and once there is something riding on it, and once it is actually competitive, that something will turn on in their heads, and and that's why we kind of say that that preseason games don't really mean anything. It's not just to sort of a little comfort blanket to make us feel better about not scoring any goals. It genuinely, the results don't really mean anything. Forest have had brilliant preseasons before and then gone on to kind of really tank when the season starts. So, yeah, I would have liked to have seen a few more goals, but I'm not worried at all, really.
Nick, Forest known last season for being kind of defensively resolute, good on the counter-attack, not seeing too much of the ball, but the directness of Hudson-Odoi and Elanga was plain for everyone to see. Is Nuno going to try and change that this season, do you think? Or do you think it's going to be kind of similar to what it was last year?
He's definitely going to maybe not change the sort of default way that Forest play. Certainly have options to play in different ways. The problem last season, the big problem was that there was always a plan for if Forest had taken the lead. But there didn't really seem to be a plan if Forest ever went behind. They only won 1 game after conceding the first goal last season, which was against Aston Villa, and that was a little bit not lucky, but it was a sort of late smash and grab job. So they will be trying to play in a slightly different way to in order to kind of mitigate against that slightly, and I think that's why a player like McAtee will come in to just have another kind of option, another way of playing. He will. I would imagine that he will start most of the time on the kind of right of to the right of Morgan Gibbs-White, which obviously is a very, very different default option to Anthony Elanga, for whom Dan N'Doye is the more kind of direct replacement. So I wouldn't be surprised if McAtee will start on the right in like a lot of home games, and maybe Elanga will. Elanga, just can't let him go. Maybe N'Doye will start there in away games. Maybe when the plan is to be a bit more like last season, a bit more counter attacking. So yeah, I think for certainly for big games when Forest are away at the biggest teams, that we will see very similar stuff to last season, but there will be a lot more options, and I think they will change the way they play a fair bit more than they did last season.
And this is a big question, what's success for Forest this season, Nick?
Someone was asking me this earlier on, actually. I would personally, I would love a kind of decent run in Europa League and maybe in one of the cups again as well. And if the kind of trade-off for that is a sort of slightly a much lower finish in the table, lower mid-table, something like that, then I personally would be very happy with that. Whether the hierarchy, Mr. Marinakis, will be happy with that, I don't know. But yeah, I think if they can go kind of fairly deep into the Europa League, first time Forest have been in Europe since 1996, so that's for those of us who kind of were going to games in League One and stuff when Forest were right down there, it's like a kind of a reward for standing in an open terrace at Doncaster and getting rained on, and trip to fucking Preston every year to just kind of with the greatest respect for those clubs, of course, but it did get a bit tiresome year after year going to the same places. So for us, all this is a bit of a reward. We obviously don't know who we're going to be playing in the Europa League yet, but if we get like Roma or Porto, someone like that, then
be class.
It's going to be a real kind of, I can't really believe this is happening. I'm seeing my team play in these incredible places. So I think that not the league is necessarily going to be a kind of secondary concern, and come and speak to me again in November if Forest are like in the bottom 3 or something like that, having completely prioritized Europe. But that would be the thing. Put it this way, I think if Forest go out in the group stage of the Europa League and finish 8th, or if they get to the last stage of the Europa League and finish like 15th or something like that, we'd remember the latter season much more than we would the former one. So that's what I'm hoping for anyway.
I'm just trying to. I was googling the season where Wolves got deep into the Europa League and Nuno was the manager, and where they finished that season. You know that off the top of your head? I was trying to.
Off the top of my head, they were sort of about 10th or 11th, but I could be wrong.
You'd take that with the run that they had. 100%.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. Moving on to the game on Sunday, big summer of change for us. Onlookers have been touting us for relegation this season, or to be in and amongst it. Well, to be fair, that kind of happens every season, but this season definitely, there's way more opinions, way more videos, way more social media posts around Brentford being in trouble this season, particularly with how Sunderland and Leeds have strengthened. Your thoughts on that? I'm interested.
I still think that if I was going to put money on who's going to get relegated, it will be the 3 teams that have come up. At the end of last season, I would have been fairly optimistic about Burnley, but they've obviously lost their goalkeeper and not. I mean, not entirely convinced about the players that have come in, but so I would still say the bottom 3 are the favourites to get relegated. It is obviously, Brentford, so you put them in the kind of similar, from an outsider perspective anyway, so put them in the similar box to teams like Brighton, in as much as you've always seemed to have this ability to sell your best player and then somehow get better, which obviously kind of bodes well for this sort of period of uncertainty, or whatever, however you want to call it. But to lose your coach, replace him with someone who has never managed a senior team before, and then to lose 2 of, I don't know, from an outsider's perspective anyway, 2 of your 3 best players, and the third wants to leave. That does feel like it's far too much. Far too much disruption for one summer for a team to handle. But again, we are halfway through August, and there's still a lot of time in the transfer window yet. So, we might get to the end of the month and Brentford will have signed a few pretty good players, and things all look a little bit rosier again.
I think Keith Andrews is the touch point, isn't it? Because I did a video on it, and from the evidence we have of Brentford losing important players at the club, losing managers, even when we lost Dean Smith, we appointed Thomas Frank. We've always managed to get better, but Keith Andrews is the complete unknown, isn't it? And what I kept telling myself and trying to tell our fans who are shitting themselves is that, like, the owners and the management structure that have been so good at Brentford and have taken us from League One to the Premier League must see the same things in Keith Andrews that they saw in Thomas Frank. So that's what I'm telling myself. But I don't mind being an underdog. I quite like the fact that everyone's writing us off, and I'm hopeful that we can kind of I know there's going to be a dip. I think that's realistic, but I think I'm like you. I think if I'm going to put money on teams to go down, it would be the 3 that have come up. Again, I just think that gap right now between the Prem and the Championship is just absolutely massive. But yeah, always a bit of needle when Forest and Brentford play each other. I don't know if that's the Forest wide thing when you play any team, but
we seem to have that effect on teams. There's I don't know. There's the whole kind of business about the Ivan Toney's free kick a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah.
And what else is there? Has there been any other beef? I can't really
Brennan
remember.
Johnson, when we chased him for a while.
Oh yeah.
So we were talking about this beef on our pod last season, and we were kind of trying to trace it back to wherever it started. And I think there might have been a game in the Championship where some time wasting was going on. But maybe, apparently ever since then, apparently it's been a bit toxic. But it's always fun. I think that kind of, when you wait a whole summer for the football to come back, and then you've got a game that you actually give a toss about, and it would be nice to get one over you. Similarly, it would be nice for you to get one over us after last season towards the back end. But yeah, what kind of go on?
I think from a I mean, I find it difficult to keep track of the beefs, but if there is beef, from a Forest's perspective, there's a subconscious element might have been that we were in this for 23 years. We're in this kind of position where we had a sort of superiority complex, in as much as people were always going, "Oh, Forest are a Premier League team; they should be in the Premier League." Blah blah blah. But we were terrible for a lot of that. In fact, not even terrible, just nothing. Like finish between 8th and who cares every season in the Championship. And so there was a vague sense of kind of maybe subconscious entitlement that like we should be in the Premier League, and then to see plucky upstarts Brentford who were in League One and League Two for a lot of the time that Forest were winning trophies in the 80s and 70s and whatever. There was an element. I think there was probably an element of subconscious. Well, what are these guys doing in the Premier League? We should be there, having got there a year. Was it a year? When did you get promoted? 21.
21, yeah.
21, yeah. So having got there a year before Forest did, I think there was probably a small element of that, like this kind of all very childish and petty. And I don't think that many people will actually have vocalized this, but I think there was probably a subconscious element of that as well.
I hope so, Nick.
Yeah. It's always better with a little bit of needle, isn't it?
Exactly. What kind of game are you expecting on Sunday, do you think?
I think it will be quite, kind of get the feeling it'll be quite cagey, given that you have got two teams who are, well, maybe not Forest team isn't quite much of a work in progress, because it will be quite similar to, apart from Malanga not being there, the first choice team is pretty similar to how it was last season. It'll be the same goalkeeper, same back four. It'll be Elliot Anderson and someone else in midfield. It'll be Gibbs-White probably as the 10 behind Wood, Hudson-Odoi on the left, and then someone probably on Doy on the right. So from that perspective, Forest will look fairly familiar. Brentford, I just don't know. I mean, who's will presumably, it will be Henderson in for Norgard in midfield, and I don't know who's going to be playing up front, Schade or
Well, I think Schade might be injured, but we've got Igor Thiago, who we signed last
season.
God,
yeah, of course.
Who was injured, injured the whole of last campaign. But I know what you mean. I have an idea of the lineup. We've still not replaced Brian and Bumo, but I think one or two are going to come in, which means Whistle will go as well. But it's just like you said, all we've got are the couple of preseason games that we played. But how much can you take from them? I don't know. We don't know really how Keith Andrews wants to play, and if it's going to be too different to Frank. Yeah. I imagine not, because don't want to rip up the playbook. But I do think it's just exciting. I just can't wait. Honestly, it's been a long summer, lots of change, and I just want the football to start doing the talking now. But yeah, score prediction, Nick. What do you reckon?
I think Forest will probably win narrowly, maybe 2-1, something like that.
I wouldn't be too displeased with that, to be honest. I think we need to get some bodies in. I don't really think our season's really going to start until September, until we replace Brian and Bumo and Johan Wissa. But yeah, I would take that. I'm going to be a bit more optimistic. I'm going to go 2-1 Brentford on the other side. But I would take I just want to see a good performance. You know what I mean? I think performances at the start of the season are key. the points will come towards the back end. But I feel like you want to know that we've got something, which is kind of what I want to see on Sunday. But Nick, an absolute pleasure, mate. The Ealing Road podcast will be back after the Forest result. Remember, just before we go, drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the game. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Nick, absolute pleasure, mate.
Thank you very much for having me.